Keith Wood, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning. I'm slightly confused that in the previous conversation there was Eusebio and Reb C. Nesbitt. I don't think they've ever been juxtaposed beside each other before, but actually I had dinner with Eusebio about 30 years ago.
Wow.
Which was about as big a claim to fame as I have. One of the 4 autographs I ever got in my life. There was it would have been Aircom back in the day, an Aircom sports dinner, and I happened to be sitting beside him. He was brought over to it, and he was as cool as cool. So,
who are the other autographs? Because I know you're not a man to be starstruck, but I think Eusebio's fair enough. Who else?
You'll laugh. There's a kind of alternative group. Jack Nicklaus,
right?
Seve Ballesteros, and Micheál O'Murray-Hurtig.
Right.
The 4th.
Wow.
There we go. That's my most random grouping, I suppose, of all time. And I remember asking Micheál for it, and he burst out laughing. Sure, he of course is the biggest gent of them all, you know.
Oh yeah, wow, that is a good group. We will genuinely get into that some other time, because I do want to talk to you about your appearance on Off the Ball last week, which set the cat amongst the pigeons. What kind of a week have you had? Because I suspect you've been in the papers every day. Everybody's been asking Johan van Graan about your comments. It's almost like you broke ranks and everybody followed.
Yeah, I don't know that it was a breaking of the ranks. I would have said that for the last, I'd say nearly 12 months at this stage, Ger, I have, I found it's just been hard to watch at times. I just don't think the style suits us. That's the question. That was the topic of the question that Joe Malloy had asked me. And I don't think we're big enough, and I think the game has moved, and that was the main crux of what I was trying to get across last week. Was I think we need to have a style that suits the players that we have, and I actually think we win and we get away with a fair amount actually, but it's hard to watch, and I think it's difficult for a whole variety of different reasons if the game is built around a South African style with a huge amount of South African players. So is that going to be the case going forward? That comes down to be the issue. So, and the reason, I don't know that I broke ranks, but the reason I said it last week was Van Graan is going. That is the truth. It's not as if I was calling for his head per se. He is already going. Now, I would still expect him to be professional all the way to the end, and he came out and said that yesterday. I don't have any doubt about that whatsoever. But it's whether that is going to be the right thing for Munster going forward, because the style and the manner of the game, when you get excited and are waiting to watch a game and there's so little sport on, and you go and Connacht are at home on a tough, wet, dirty day, and Munster don't particularly play, well, then that's very frustrating. And I think as a fan, or as a whole variety of different elements, I think it's worth asking, is that the style that we want Munster to be playing going forward? And then you look at the other games that are on at the same weekend. Now, they happen to be over in the Premiership, and they're exciting and they're something to watch. But I just thought it was very hard. So I think a lot of people, maybe it broke the seal a little, and a lot of people have wanted to kind of query in relation to it. An awful lot of that has been brought down to being about Van Graan. For me, it's about the style that we're trying to go and play. And I can't say that was last week that I've been saying that. I've been saying that for 12 months.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I think that, if you zoom out a little bit, who's making the decision about who the next coach is?
Well, that's an entirely different question. And look, so I would say that for a long period of time, there has been, if we go back 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I'd said that the IRFU contract, and these are IRFU contracts, they're not provincial contracts. The IRFU contract, giving that 6-month break, for me is not a great place to be. So that's not a great place to start. And consistently, for a variety of reasons, and of course with the terrible passing of Anthony Foley 5 years ago, decisions have had to be made on the fly. But it seems like an awful lot of decisions are being made on the fly. And the idea of there being a level of succession planning doesn't quite exist within the structure. That's an issue, So, having a coach who decides he's signing on for 2 years and then decides he doesn't, you don't think necessarily that you have to do your succession planning immediately. But with that contract, you need to have that plan in place all along. And I just don't think that that's there at the moment. So the coach will be picked, I presume, because it isn't exactly a transparent process, but by Nusafora, by Ian Flanagan, the Munster CEO, with support from the Professional Game Board in Munster. So that is the nature of it. So who's going to be the next coach? I'm very happy to see that they re-signed Graham Rowntree, because by all accounts he is well liked. Well, I like him, but he's well liked within Munster, but it also gives a level of continuity on coaching, which is actually very important. So I don't know. I don't know what the process is, but when you have a guy who signed on for 2 years, you're maybe not looking quite as quickly or as earnestly, and now they have to do it very quickly.
Is the structure wrong as well, where so much is invested in the persona of the individual? Before this it was Razzie, and before that it was Anthony Foley, and before that it was Rob Penny, and before that, or did I get the order wrong? Whatever the order was, there's like a long... Whereas actually if they had a director of rugby who worked for Munster as opposed to maybe the IRFU, then... the structure is, that's the structure it is in every province, that the top guy in all the different departments is an employee of the IRFU. I mean, it's a convoluted system, to be sure. Rathy is the one that stands out as being different in that group that you mentioned. Rathy was brought in as a director of rugby, and he had the skills and capability to go and do it, and we've seen what he's done in South Africa afterwards, notwithstanding his video during the lines and his reaction during the lines. But he was a director of rugby type, very strategic, very, very capable, very organised for what he wanted, and it was building up a structure that sits in underneath him. And look, I'm in favour of that. I think that is, whether it's a director of rugby or a head of rugby, or there has to be something consistent, and there has to be... and I know there's a reaction different times as to what is the Munster way and all that sort of stuff, but there has to be a Munster way, and there has to be someone who holds the keys to that isn't at the vagaries maybe of disappearing every 2 or 3 years, but there needs to be a level of consistency, but consistent improvement as well. So, I mean, that's what's required. So, yeah, I think the structure needs to be tinkered with, definitely. And I believe that Munster started to do that well with Ian Costello coming in as the head of academy, or the academy director. I don't quite know what his title is, but his job is there to build and upskill all the guys coming out of schools and clubs, and it's to try and enhance that idea of getting as many local players playing as possible from Munster. That takes a period of time, but that's something that is and has been very important for a long time, and I don't know that it's got the due regard, and I think it does now with Ian taking over that role. Munster Rugby Academy Manager is his title, but yeah, and he might be the right person for that. It was interesting to just Google that there. It was announced on the IRFU website as well, so presumably he's also an IRFU employee. Again, very opaque, very secretive. No one actually knows who works for who and what the point of that is. And look, I don't know why that is, but certainly Irish rugby has cloaked itself in a veil of secrecy, which they think seems to serve them well. I would disagree with that, but if there was somebody who was a director of rugby, if he was to ascend to that role, then he would also have responsibility for the relationship with the clubs and could start to have a much broader sweep, but look after that, while at the same time making sure that the first team squad had enough players to implement the style of play that the head coach, whose job it was to just look after that first team and the academy, like graduates, There's definitely a better structure there than investing everything in the next Messiah who comes along, and as soon as a big check gets waved from the UK or France, disappears.
Well, I do. I think it's sustainable, and I think it would be the more ideal version. I think we have a sort of de facto version of that in Leinster, as an example, partly because I know Leo's only signed on for another year, but Lancaster does an awful lot of the coaching, and Leo seems to manoeuvre all the different elements around on the outside of it, and it seems to be a very, very good partnership that's worked well. So look, it's not to copy any other province, and I have to say I don't know that every province has the exact same either resources or ideology, and I don't know that they need to. There just needs to be a structure that is able to suit them, and for too often there are too many, coaches coming and going, or for whatever reason, and I would say as well, at different times you're looking for coaches to help develop the players that are there, and you're looking to try and play a style that suits them or upskill them to a certain way. So I had a huge amount of regard for Pat Lam when he came to Connacht. And I know Connacht is a bit of a special case because you can almost get away with more in Connacht because they've less. And I know that's oxymoronic. But the idea that you can just change the way a team goes to play, this is what you're going to do, these are the skills you have to work on, it won't work straight away, but it will work in time, and you're given time. For Munster, Leinster and Ulster even, there's rarely that amount of time given to be able to help develop something that suits the players that they have at their disposal. So, but I thought Lamb did a great job, and I think Friend has done a very good job since, trying to continue that and promote that. So I'm as I am and as I have been for a while, I'm a bit frustrated with it. I was delighted when I looked at the game at the weekend. I wasn't delighted by the style of play, but I was delighted by I don't know if you just call it pure dogged determination of the team by the end of the game to eke out the most unlikely of victories. And I thought they played with a little bit of more. I thought they played with more pace. I thought Casey played a lot faster. He looked to pass, and he looked far better. I mean, I say that often. As soon as he slows down, he doesn't look great. The second he speeds it up, he actually looks the thing that was exciting when he came on the scene a couple of years ago. So, but still, having said that, it was a fairly turgid note. I used that word turgid last week, and it keeps kind of coming back. But it was a bleak day. It was lashing with rain, but there wasn't a huge amount of rugby involved in it. So, I don't expect to see Munster change too much. But now they go away for this weekend and hopefully get a big win in France. And if that's possible, we don't know quite how Castres will turn up because they're one of the consistent underperformers, though at home they do tend to play pretty well. Look, you still want Munster to do well. That's the other element that sits in this. I'm a fan as much as anything else.
From what you're saying this morning, Keith, it does seem that Munster can't just be looking for a head coach at the moment, that they need to be looking for a director of rugby as well.
I do. I think so. I think they're separate. They're separate recruitments. Actually, I think and ultimately, you need to have very rugby-oriented decisions that don't disappear when a coach disappears. And there also is a bit of a difference between the professional and the amateur game, and I do think that part of that structure makes it awkward within it. And so, look, I've said this often. I think in many respects, we're 25 years or 27 years into a professional game. It was a professional game that was planted on top of an amateur game and an amateur structure. You want both of those to thrive, but I don't know that necessarily the work was done to try and get the best out of them. Now, I think we have done incredibly well in Ireland over the last number of years, and we've succeeded very well. But the game changes and circumstance change. in cycles, every 5, 6, 7 years, and we're at a point again where it's changing. So when it's changing, it's time to kind of, you know,
change
maybe take some of the emotion out of the question, but you do have to ask the question and say, look, is this fit for purpose? If it isn't, can we have a discussion as to how this can kind of change? How can we move this around a little?
And make the succession plan. Make the succession plan public. Do you have one last one on this, or are we?
Let's move it on.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's do the depth chart, okay? Because we're hopefully 4 weeks out from the start of the Six Nations, and every year we do our depth chart to see what is going to be our starting team. Our front row looks fairly nailed on at this stage, in that we've had a massive leap forward in terms of form and application. Andrew Porter is rounding into a top quality international. The level of experience that he has for his age is huge, but also the power that he has, he's starting to kind of fully realise just his full potential. So at the moment, I guess he's number one on your loosehead chart.
Yeah, I think he's a top international forward. I don't think he's a top international loosehead yet. And that's only because I think he is a very good loosehead. I think he will be the more he plays. And actually, I'm really interested to see how he's going to go in the next year or two, because he could become world class at a loosehead. I mean, it's funny. I was looking at this when we originally had this conversation, and I looked at this depth chart to the one we did 12 months ago, and Porter wasn't at loosehead at that stage. And I remember talking about how much I loved the fact that Tadhg Furlong was their tight head, and that when he had to come off, we'd Andrew Porter to come on. That's such a rare gift to have that strength and depth. So I was a little bit nervous about the changeover that was happening with him. But it's been a revelation, actually, having both of them on the field at once. I think he's definitely the starting loosehead. When I look at the whole depth chart, I don't think there's a huge change over the last 12 months. And I don't think there'll be a huge change over the next 12 months. These are the guys that we're going to be building our house on. The first two sets of front row, to be honest.
Our loosehead, we just put it up on screen. Andrew Porter number 1, Cian Healy's number 2, Dave Kilcoyne is 3, and Ed Byrne is 4 for you. What does Kilcoyne need to do to get ahead of Cian Healy?
He needs to, Dave Kilcoyne is incredibly powerful as a ball carrier, and that is very useful when you have the space in which to do so. I think if we looked at the autumn, and that's the best way for us to view this game or this process here, is to look at what Farrell has looked to change with the Irish team. And what he's looked to do is to have a variety of different playmakers involved, a variety of different lines and pods. There are 2, 3, 4, 5 options for every single pass within it. You need ball handlers, so you don't just need to be Dave Kilcoyne running at huge accelerated pace into contact or into space, doesn't really matter, but he can't do that all the time. So there's a requirement for all the players that are big ball carriers to be able to have that subtlety. And that reason for that is you're an option, but you are not just an option for contact. You're an option to draw defenders if you release the ball back to a 9 or 10. And that's something that Furlong in particular has done incredibly well. So I think that is the progression that Farrell is looking for among his front row in particular. And for that, Kilcoyne needs to be able to mix that part of the game up more.
Okay, one last question about Andrew Porter. There was one narrative about switching from one side to the other. You're going to lose a bit. It's going to take him time to acclimatise to the role. The other way of looking at that, the other perception on that is he's coming from the harder side to scrimmage on, and actually it's going to be hugely beneficial to him having been a tight head. When he goes to loose head, it's almost like I've done all the hard stuff now. I'm out of the treacle that I used to be in, and I can be far more disruptive now.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see whether you'd say Tadhg Furlong is stuck in treacle, but I do take the point. And Porter had been a loose head originally, had moved to tight head. Tight head is notoriously difficult, damaging almost on players. I do think there'd be a liberation for him going across, but also his reaction to going across has been beyond professional. You know, I think he's given the Leinster team and the Irish team a stronger scrum, because Cian Healy the fact that Cian Healy is still playing is pretty amazing, you know, from the injuries that he has had, and the quality of his performances, even in the autumn, were just fantastic. So I think you get an opportunity to get the most that you can possibly get out of Cian Healy because Andrew Porter has moved over there. So I think it's worked out incredibly well. I think it was, I think there was a high level of risk involved in it. But we can't sit here and say that we don't want to see some risk, you know. So I think it's worked really well.
Is there a world in which someone like Andrew Porter actually becomes a hybrid prop if, say, Tadhg Furlong picks up a knock and misses one or two games at the Six Nations? For example, would he be your first choice tight head and start Cian Healy were Tadhg Furlong to be out for a couple of games in this year's campaign?
Well, it's funny you've said that. I've been looking. I never liked the idea that the front row would go off after 55 minutes or 60 minutes. I'm never a fan of that. If you looked at the autumn, the players played longer. And I wonder whether that was part of a design from Farrell to try and say, can we get them on for 70 minutes or do whatever. If that is the case, if players are going to play for longer, I think that then becomes more realistic that you just want to have the best players on the field, however you can manage them on. So yes, I think that's rare that can happen. But even if you've looked at some of the, again, Premiership matches, some of the players, Coles for Leicester has been playing very large amounts of minutes. Marler has been playing 80-minute games nearly entirely because he's able to, and they're able to. And so again, we're going in cycles where everybody was taken off after 55 minutes. That's beginning to change now. So I think you want the best players on the field whenever you can. And that's one thing I will say about the autumn internationals as well. Traditionally, there would be chopping and changing of the team, and you'd have a lot of different players. That didn't happen in the front row. Ireland pretty much stuck with the same people to see how they'd get on, how they would go. And I'm not a huge fan of chopping and changing large amounts of players. And you do need core players that should be picked pretty much all the time.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think is because we were seeing Ronan Kelleher arrest the number 2 jersey and take it, and it was like, okay, we're just going to make sure you bet in here and see what that unit is like, and he is your number 1 when it comes to hooker at this stage.
Yeah, Kelleher is my number 1. I have Dan Sheehan in at number 2 and Rob Herring at number 3. That's hard on Rob Herring, and I have to say Herring has reacted to not being picked in the autumn, and he has put in some pretty decent performances since. And the reason I've put them in that number is because that is ultimately the future, but it's the future you kind of need to work on now. And again, we had this discussion before. I think Kelleher is standout. I think Sheehan is behind him, but he doesn't have the experience yet. But I would want him to be trying to gain that experience as much as possible, and that's why I have him in the second slot. And for Rob Herring in particular, you just know you can trust him. But I think there is a much higher ceiling for the 2 guys. They're bigger men, and they're younger, and we've known in times past that when you get to a World Cup, you want a blend of the old and the new. And but if you have guys that are very big and powerful and have enough of rugby under their belt, then you want them at a World Cup. And I'm looking forward to that. I think it's exciting. I think they are two players in the one province fighting with each other constantly. They're only going to drive each other one way, you know.
Yeah, and the one caveat would be it's going to be difficult for Sheehan to get a lot of experience between now and the World Cup, assuming Kelleher's fitness. So you'd hope that he gets game time both for Ireland and Leinster. Yeah,
I mean it is difficult, and technical positions are they're difficult. You can train all day long, and you can throw at a point on the wall all day long, and you can hit a scrummaging machine all day long. But it's the matches and the big matches, and how different players react against you under pressure, and how you're able to react under pressure, are the key components for that experience that needs to be built. So, look, he needs to be playing. She needs to play a huge amount. There is a difficulty with that, but it also might mean we could end up with two hookers that are fighting for the one position, who are almost sharing the load, and we might be able to get the most out of them over a long period of time. That's okay. And also we get injuries.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to accept the fact that it kind of evens out over some level of time.
The tight head position, obviously, Tadhg Furlong, this is not a secret, is top of the depth chart, funnily enough. Genuinely world class, potentially our best player at the moment. The one issue is that behind him, so Finlay Bealham is your number 2, Tom O'Toole is 3, and John Ryan is number 4. Bealham's coming back into a bit of form, and you would just hope that there's some, not pressure on Tadhg Furlong, but that the replacements get to a level where we're like, yeah, that's fine. You're as good at the moment as Sheehan or Cian Healy at the moment, or Kilcoyne even. We just need. I guess I'm saying we need a bit of confidence when Tadhg Furlong goes off that his replacement is going to be up to international quality.
Well, I think to the point earlier on, if you're asking me who is second behind Tadhg Furlong, in truth, I'd say it's Andrew Porter. And that could be part of the change of it. I think Bealham has played pretty well this year. But there's a very large gap between him and Furlong, or him and Porter. And one thing I will say about Furlong is Furlong doesn't need anybody behind him to push him. He's a setter of his own standard, and there's just no issue with him at all. But he becomes incredibly important to keep fit. And we do need to try and upskill the other tight heads, because there is a big gap there now. So I don't know what Farrell again will think, whether he'll say, well, actually we can definitely have Bealham or Tom O'Toole on the bench, and we're okay with that. But actually, if it really became a big issue, would it go back to being Porter? And that's the question. I don't know, but for me, actually, the second best tight head is Andrew Porter.
Okay.
But he can't play both sides of the scrum at once.
No. So we're desperately hoping that we never find out what the answer to that question is if an injury happens to Furlong.
Or we desperately hope that we can drive on the guys behind it. And I have to say, for Bealham, Tom O'Toole and John Ryan, the fact of Porter moving across to Loosehead does give a window for more things to happen. You know, it does that they will get a chance, because again, we go back to the dreaded word injury. If the people get injured, you get bumped up the line. So you're going to have to be able to do it. So maybe that just means they'll push on a little bit more.
Keith, great stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Pleasure. Cheers, gents.
It's Keith Wood giving us his front row depth chart, and we'll stick that up on the website for you. You can get it on YouTube as well.